I hope you guys had fun yesterday working on the weather app. I know that it takes time, it takes a little bit of practice, and it was difficult. Okay, but these are the fundamental building blocks of what we're going to do with programming. We're going to be getting data. We need to read that data. We need to change it somehow to something that's useful to us. Would you guys like to see a walkthrough of what I did for my application? I'll just show you guys a quick walkthrough of like how I did certain things, okay? Okay, so let's talk about what it does from the get-go, okay? From the get-go, we can see that immediately upon the application loading, we have a state of, well, it happened so quickly. It's loading for a split second. And in that time, we don't want to show a blank screen, guys. We want to indicate to the user like, hey, we understood what they want. They want the weather. And it's taken us a second to do that. So we indicate to them that like, we're doing that. We show them a loader. Afterward, when that's done, we render the temperature using the data that we got back, as well as a photo. But the photo is a little bit more complicated. We gotta figure out the temperature first. So we see that the application isn't really that complicated. We only have, what, six functions in this weather application, right here. I guess we have 7, including the constructor. In the constructor, it's useful to go ahead and set up the data that we're going to need. It helps us understand the state of our application. So, you guys can see that there's a background image. So to start off, we decided to say that, hey, the background image is null. We also have weather, which is null, temperature, loading, and location name. You guys can see that this is an object. It's just an object that we're putting in state. This syntax, this .setState, can only be used inside of one function, the constructor function. It's a special function, and this is the only time we can do that. Other than that, we're always going to be saying this .setState, because when we run this .setState and pass it its object, once again, you guys know that our application will update its state, and then afterwards it will render again, and the application will simply display based on the data that we currently have. It will react to the state of our application. So we're loading, it's fetching, it fetched, then done. Another thing that I thought would be interesting is that every single time we do get weather, I thought it'd be interesting if we would add a photo from that city that the person is searching for. Because the first time it's going to be Ho Chi Minh City, because we're all in Ho Chi Minh City, right? But there are people in other places in the world. And in order to highlight this behavior, I thought it would be useful for us to have some default cities that we said, hey, a user can also just search for these cities. So you click Miami, we get Miami. We did this by defining some data up top, which is basically some hard-coded data. It's okay to do this sometimes. We don't always need to get our data from an API. That's not necessary. Certain things, certain data will always be the same. It's okay to Google it, hard code it, and let it make it run just to show that like this behaves quickly, and we can move on, so that we can move on to bigger and better things, right? So here's our data. What is it? It's just an array, and this array has some objects. It has a bunch of objects. So let's see. Let's look at our render function. In our render function, I know it's a little bit noisy here, guys. It's kind of hard to understand because there's a lot of structure. But this is what the application will start looking like when you guys style it. When you guys start styling it, it's going to get a lot more complicated. So we can see that somewhere we render something, a bunch of buttons, a list of buttons somewhere. And here, it's this function called render cities. Okay? So this .render cities, we can see that what we're doing is we're mapping over all our cities, the cities variable, and then we're just rendering a button. And on these buttons, we have an on-click listener, which says this.getWeather. We pass it the city's latitude, the city's longitude, as the arguments to get weather. Get weather, we'll take a latitude, take a longitude, and it'll do a fetch request. I showed you guys a couple different ways to do this. Not a couple different ways. I showed you guys that there are 2 different ways to do this. In reality, there are more, but this is the older way. You guys could have also used a try-catch right here on line 98 through 120. Okay, and remember we talked about set state, guys? What's its first argument? What's that state's first argument, guys? It's an object. Thank you, Phil. We can stick anything in state that we want to, but it needs to be a data type. It needs to be a Boolean or a string or an array, something new, something number. We can stick any data we want in here. And this is how we should be doing it. We should be sticking our data in our state so that we can easily fetch it later on. We can easily find the state of our application. What is the second argument to set state? It's a function. So we can determine that by looking at this dot. The reason why you guys may sometimes see parentheses and not see parentheses is because we don't want this to fire immediately. In the way, if we add parentheses to it, as soon as this part of the code reads, get background image will fire immediately. We don't want to fire it immediately. It's an anonymous function. We simply want to pass it. We want to pass it to someone, to another component to be used. The set state component. Whenever it's done setting state, it's going to fire this API, this function right here. What does this function do? Get background image. So you can see that get background image is just another function for us, right? It makes a request to an API, and it has 2 arguments. The first argument is something to search for. We could change this to anything, right? This could have been anything, guys. This is simply an API whose library we used. What is this cat? Is that a cat? Yeah, it's a cat. But what do we do here, guys? Instead of searching for any random image, we looked at our application state. We looked at the location that is currently being set. And how do we know what the location is? Well, whenever we made a request for our weather, we got some data back. In that data, we had a name, and we set that state, location name. So when get background image fired, our location name was set to our application state. Because think about it. If we click San Francisco, right, isn't the state of our application changing, right? We want the data from a specific location, from Tokyo, for example. So I think that a reasonable piece of state would be the location. And to be more explicit, because we want to help out our teammates, I went ahead and called it location name. That way people could know what to expect in it. It could be the name of some location. Because later on, location might be a location address, a location type. There are many different, as you guys have come to see in programming, we got to be very explicit with our namings. So anyway, a user clicks a button. We update the state. Afterwards, after the state has been updated, we fire a different function, get background image. That uses a library called unsplash image, right? And this is, once again, a function call. We can see by the parentheses right here. This is a function call. And it's also, it takes some time. We pass it our states, the application state, the current state of the location that the user is interested in, or Vietnam. Why do we do this? Because the first time the application loads, we want to have some sensible default data. If this class was taught in San Francisco, we could have done this. San Francisco. and our default data would, our default picture would end up being what? Oh, the reason why this happens is, well, the very first time it fires, location name is default. Where am I at? But get weather will fire when the component mounts. Well, this right here, navigator.geolocation.get current position will fire, and then within that, our this.get weather will fire. But remember, when we do get weather and component did mount, we end up changing. Where is it at? Get weather. We end up changing location's name. So because our navigator geolocation, it was the first thing to fire, we ended up getting the data for the current user's location immediately. It was the first thing that we got. We did something like this, now it would definitely be San Francisco. San Francisco. There we go. And remember, what's going on here, what we're doing right here for the first argument to this function call is we're saying, hey, if we don't have a location name, just give us Vietnam. That simple. Unsplash takes a little bit of configuration to work with for those of you guys who want to use it in the future. Okay, you got to go there, you got to create an account, we got to get a secret ID or secret token, and we also got to get an application ID. APIs, although they're free, those people that build them want something. They didn't do that for free. They need to at least have some data so they can show some investors and say, look, we got 10,000 people using this API every single day. Each developer makes 40 requests per minute. That's our average. They need some data to say, hey, I need you to give me more money so I can continue working on this and build this for you for the future. I just want you guys to know that like us signing up for an account isn't a bad thing. We're helping them, we're helping them get additional funding to continue their work, and they're helping us. They're giving us something for free. So it's okay to sign up for API keys. And this one specifically is called Unsplash. So once again, I know that like this may get tiring to hear, but we got to do research on our APIs. We got to read through the documentation. We got to see what's available. The last thing I'm going to say about this Unsplash right here, right, is that whatever search term that we search for, when we get the data back on line 86, we're going to get an array of data. This is going to be an array of data. With JSON, that results is going to be an array. And because we want to make our application more interesting and not show the same exact photo every single time the application loads, what are we doing here, guys? We're randomly selecting one of the images from the data that we got back. Okay? I know this may be hard to imagine right now, but like as we go, like I didn't write this off the top of my head. At some point, I did console.log, response, and I looked at it. And then we got some data, and I was like, all right, here's an array. Which key do we need to look at? And I was like, okay, I think we need to look at results. And then we saw that it was in fact an array. And inside this array was a bunch of images. And basically, these images we called items had a key called URL, and that key, URLs, and that key also had another key called full. Because this API would give us many different size photos, and I wanted the best one. So we need to do some research, and we need to carefully examine our data as we're working. Okay, guys? Does anyone have any other questions about this application, the weather application? Any other questions? All right, guys. So we're gonna move on to today's lab. Once again, we can see that we're following the same pattern, guys. It's basically a React component, and it has a bunch of different functions on it. Okay? This is what I hope you guys can build by the end of class. To me, like when I see something like this, it's like well laid out. It says that the person knows how to like use space. Don't waste space. It also shows that we can parse data. What can we do here? Can we search? We can search. We can search the title. Can we search the body? We can search the body. Obviously, you guys can see the data with ratings and popularity and release date and etc. Okay, you guys can see that in the images and whatnot. We can think about these as components. These will eventually end up being components, their own separate component. They will have knowledge of just themselves. This element for Life is Beautiful does not need to know what is inside of Pulp Fiction. It just needs to know how to render itself. Okay? And so obviously a lot of this behavior is not going to be in your guys' lab, but this is my hope of you guys. I hope you guys can challenge yourselves and build something kind of like this. And you guys can do the sorting however you guys want. You know, you guys can display it however you guys want, but I really want to see some more complicated behavior from you guys, okay? Because not only can we search for the title and the body, right? We can also, so right now we can search from most popular to least popular. So we can see that right now popularity is 200. If we do the inverse, least popular to most popular, that also works. And so we just got to think about what each one of these buttons does. How does our application state change, right? So we click most popular to least popular. We want to take all our movies that are in our state, and then we want to sort them from the ones who have the highest popularity score to the lowest popularity score. And now obviously the inverse of that is least popular to most popular. So we need to have a function. We need to be able to write a function that takes an array of data. It says, hey, this is a function. I'm going to get some data, some movies, and I need to take all these movies and sort them from the popularity, one way or the other. Another thing that I have right here is the different genres. Okay? So this one isn't that complicated as well. This one we simply look at all our movies, and then we look at the genre IDs that are in the JSON object. And after we look at that, we collect them all and get all the unique genres. All the unique genres, we simply look at its name. And you say, hey, render some buttons here. And then when we render the buttons, we make another function. We say, hey, look at all my movies. Count all the movies where this genre, that have this genre listed. And you guys can imagine that this is just a bunch of little function calls. Right? And in terms of styling, guys, how much styling did we really need to add? Almost none. Almost none. We did obviously add a little bit here, okay? We added a little bit here and there. But the point I'm trying to make here is I want you guys to practice using Bootstrap, because this is something that, you know, is going to help you guys out a lot. There is some styling here to get the layout that we want, yes. But the vast majority of this application is simply using the default styling, because it's reasonably styled. It's going to have some sensible defaults. We don't have to do too much work. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about the application? Anything they want to see? Anything interesting?
Yeah, can you search actors' names?
Right now, our application does not have access to so I would love to do that, but in order to always be able to look at our data, let's see, render movies. Okay, so get movies. So whenever our request for the API comes back, something I like doing is whatever object it is that we're going to be working with a lot, we just get one of them and we console log it, and we do not delete that. Whatever data we're working with, if we have a list of data, I would prefer that each one of you guys always console logs one of those pieces of data. So whenever something like that comes up, hey, can we look for this? Can we look for that? We can easily open up our browser, open up our developer tools, look at the object, and then try to find what we're looking for. Ray a moment ago asked us for actors. So far, when I look at this object, this movie object, I don't see a list of actors here, right? So that leads me to think, right now we need additional data. We don't have enough data right now, not as the application is currently built. So at this point, we need to read our documentation. So we could look over here, and we can look at our movies, get details. This is get details of a movie. We've got to study this very closely. And I don't see anything that says actors. Actresses. Actors. get rated movies, etc. I don't see this. I really don't see this, Ray. I really want to have that too, but I haven't been able to find it. I just see right here on the left it says movies, and there's certain details. Get details of movies. So it has a movie. The route looks like movie, and then inside of here we'll have an ID. Okay. But right here in our response object, the example they give us, it tells us the data type we can expect, etc. It tells us a lot of things. But right here, when I search this, I don't see actors. So right now, our application cannot do that. We need to talk to our API team and ask them, hey, we need you to do something additional because we have a new requirement from our product owner that we show actors. Okay, so did I stop recording? Is that recording? What? Why is it? Okay, whatever. I think it's still recording. Is it still recording? Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. So I'm gonna go ahead and kill the server. You guys can see that I'm currently in this project. Now let's go ahead and make a new one because we're gonna make an entirely new application. So we're gonna do npx create React app our movies. So in order to, we know what we need to expect, some decent styling. Let's go ahead and prepare. So let's go hop over to our documentation for Bootstrap. And we can see that we need to run npm install Bootstrap. So I'm going to cd into our movies. I'll run this command, npm install. Every time, every application, yeah. We need to run that command, and we need to do one more step. We need to get this link from a cd in to have the styling. So we're just adding styling. Oops, I'm in the wrong folder. Actually, I do want that open. I'm going to cheat probably in a little bit. Sorry guys, this takes a little bit. All right, so once again, guys, remember, we're just copying in some styles from the internet. All right, so that looks good. Remember, guys, the only file that we should be touching at this point is app.js. And let's go ahead and fix this up because we need to update the behavior of our application. Class app extends React.component. Okay, that looks good. Now we're gonna implement our render function and return this. So just say hello to tests. Wow, we're still downloading. Okay, so let's go ahead and just get up our layout a little bit and look at this as an example. I see a little bit of a tab right here. So I want to go ahead and lay out the application in such a way. Well, how would you guys like to start? What would you guys like to see implemented first?
Or how would you begin?
So I mean, I want to.
How would you write it out? You know what I mean? So like.
I like to think of my application in data. So that's what I would do first, personally. I would say, all right, what data do I need? And then I worry about the visual elements later. Yeah, I don't worry about the API right now. That's in my personal opinion. No, I'm trying to say because I feel like to me, I've heard some feedback saying that like I move too quickly, don't explain it well enough, etc. But to me, I just want to know like what you guys feel. If I was your boss and I told you I need you guys to build this, what would you guys start thinking about? I would start thinking about the data, in my opinion, either the data or the layout. They're both both of them are required. A chicken needs an egg needs a chicken.
What do you mean by data?
So I mean by data is like how am I going to structure the data in the application, right? So I would go ahead and make a copy of something I would think that we need. So that would be a good use case for me to use the constructor. Let me say props You say super props, and you say this dot state equals an object. So when we look at this application, what is the type of data that we can see? So let's just start off with the most obvious one, the movies. So I'm gonna do movies equals an array. We have to have an array of data right here. I don't know how else to do this, to be honest with you. This has to be an array of data. We have a list of similar types of objects. Okay, so that makes the most sense to have an array here. I also see a types right here. These are genres. This is also an array. Genres, also an array. Okay. Lastly, I see up here a search. I don't know if we're gonna do search. We're gonna show you guys search today because it's not in the lab, but if we have enough time, we'll get to it. So we'll say search, search text, and we'll say that's an empty string. Okay. All right. So now we have this data. We have a basic representation of what our data is going to look like. Now, when the application loads, we can simply console.log our data. Fuck. We console log. We run, guys. npm start, and yarn start will do the same thing. I also have a shortcut called ys called yarn start. So I'm going to run yarn start. The application loads, or the server is getting booted up. The server is up, and now we can see our hello. And if we look at our console log, we can see that we did in fact log our state. Our application does have a sense of state. So let's see what our state is. It's an object. If we expand this object, we can see that this object has a key genres and another key movies, as well as search text, which is a string. So now the application is loaded. We have a basic idea of the structure of the data of our application. Now the question becomes, how can we get some data, right? How can we get some data about movies? So we use this API, the moviedb.org. And specifically, I want, whenever our application loads, for us to go out to the internet and get some data. So we'll do a component did mount, and then we'll say, hey, because, and I'm gonna tell you like a more advanced pattern here, guys. Because component did mount will end up doing a lot of different things one day, we're just gonna call a function. This.get movie data, okay? We're gonna call a function. And we haven't even defined this yet, but that's the behavior I want to see, because component did mount, we're gonna have a bunch of logic in it. So now we're just gonna define a new function, right? And we're gonna test to make sure this fires correctly. So we say console.log, getting movie data. Getting movie data. So when we refresh, and we look at our application, we can see that this console log did in fact fire. So our component, our React application mounted the app component. The app component fired its lifecycle function. The component did mount function. That function had a function inside of it. The component did mount function had a function inside of it, and this function fired on line 20. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and do some more. We need to make an API request to get some data. And I want to go ahead and save some time, so I'm just going to copy over the URL. So this is exactly what we did last time, yesterday, guys. Well, I did it a little bit differently because I had a page number. But we make an asynchronous function call, okay? We call a function that is globally defined, called fetch. Anywhere in JavaScript, we can call this function. This is for free. So we call this function, and this function has an argument. What is this argument, guys? What data type is it? That's what's inside. That's what the data type represents. It's just a string. Yes. This is just a function call. We call our function fetch, and we give it a data type. We give it the argument of a URL, and this URL is going to be of data type string. So we also need to do one more step. We need to parse our response, JSON data. So we need to say response await response dot JSON call. So we're not 100% sure this works, right? We just copied a little bit of code and we kind of did use some data. We kind of used some stuff we already knew. So I think it's a good time to console log. So we refresh and our page, we can see that we did in fact get some data here. And what data type was this, guys? It's an object. Data, JSON data is an object, okay? Let's copy this. We'll copy, I don't know, is that what I'm doing? Store as a global variable, and then we say temp1 dot results. Temp1, let's do type of temp1. The response that we got back from this API was an object. We just proved it. So we can do temp1, hit enter, and look at its keys. What are we interested in, guys? Right now, we only care about results. There are a lot of other things we can do in this application, but right now, the only data we're concerned with in the context of this function call is the results. So we hop back over to our code, we say results, okay? So we can see that now the results is in fact an array. So we can say, let's just copy this right here, copy or store the global variable, temp1, and we can now do type of temp1. Oh, an array is an object too. Fuck. But just know that this is in fact an array. Trust me, this is an array, okay? Okay, so now what can we do? Well, our application has a sense of state. It understands that it needs to have movies, and we're going to render over these movies, right? So whenever we get our data back from the API, we're going to set state. And we're just going to pass it the object that we want. So we're going to say const movies equals an array, JSON.data. Okay, my bad. That's not what I'm doing. It's an array. Movie. We're going to say new state right here. And that is an object. And then it's going to have one key, movies. And what's going to go in the value? JSON.data.results. Okay? So now we can say something like new state right here. And I'm deliberately doing this kind of confusingly because I want you guys to constantly think about this is an object. The first argument is an object. Even though I'm not doing it this way, I want you guys to know this is exactly the same thing. And then afterwards, we can do the second argument to set state. We can pass it a function. And we can just say, hey, let's look at this state now. The state after getting movie data, this dot state. Okay? So we refresh and we say this state after getting movie data. We can look at it and we can see that in fact our application state has changed. The application loaded, we made an API request to get some data, we parsed that data, and then we stuck it in our application state. Okay? You guys with me? Okay. So now, let's go ahead and do something meaningful here. Let's run some code, and let's say if, this.state.movies.length is greater than 0, then what do we want to do? Say we have movies. Otherwise, we don't have movies. I messed this up. So we refresh. We have movies now, guys. The state of our application, if for a split second, you guys can see it says we don't have movies. Watch. For a split second, you guys see that? Yeah. Right? So our application did a lot of things very, very quickly. But this isn't good enough, guys. Our application has an understanding of our movie state, but now we need to actually let the user know that we have movies. So in order to speed up this process, I really recommend you guys, once again, go to Bootstrap. So we're gonna hop over to Bootstrap, we're gonna look at our components, and we're gonna look for cards. This one looks okay. So I'm gonna copy this entire thing, and I'm gonna go over here, and we're gonna delete this because this was just an example. Okay, guys, this is just an example. So we're gonna call a new function. Okay, this.render movies. Okay, we don't have this yet, so we're gonna define a new function. And what's this is going to do? This is going to look at our application state, this.state.movies, okay? And then we're going to look at each movie, and we're going to return some JSX. We're going to return what? A card. And then what's this movie? I don't know what is inside this movie, guys. So let's go ahead and just console log before we return this. Okay, we can see we have an error. So we need to import all this into our application. Guys, if I'm moving too fast, let me know. I'm moving too fast. So basically here, all we're doing is importing some components that are given to us by React or by Bootstrap navigation, by React Bootstrap. Okay. So refresh, and we can see that this.state.movies threw an error. This.state.movies.map. You guys see the error? This.state.movies. Shouldn't it be this.state.movies.map? So we roll back over here, .map. And bam, we can see that we did in fact iterate over each element in our movie state. And we got some data. So we can see some of the data that we got. Here's one of them. So let's go ahead and parse this data into our application, okay? So we'll just say overview. So we know that this object that we're dealing with, right? This element that we're dealing with is in fact an object. The movie element is in fact an object. So in order to save time and also to make our code cleaner, I'm going to destructure it. Instead of having movie in here and then doing movie.title and movie.description and all this, I'm gonna just say, I'm gonna grab all the keys off of the object immediately. So grab all the keys. So which key do we want? We wanna have title, we wanna have what? Release date, release date. We wanna have, I'm confused. Overview, maybe popularity. What else? Yeah, we have title already. And we'll just go ahead and get backdrop path. Okay, we'll get backdrop path because that's the photo. So we can see that we have all this data now. Let's go ahead and stick it in here. So before we move quickly, let's just test one of them. Let's test title. So refresh. And we see we have a problem. We have a big problem right now. We don't have anything rendering here. Everything seems to have worked okay. We mapped over all the elements of the array. We tested it, but we just don't see anything. That is usually an indicator that we forgot to return somewhere. So when render movies fired, right? We did in fact return from each iteration of the loop, but we did not return from the actual function call. So I added return right here, and I expect to see stuff. Okay, so we can see that we do have some cards here. We have some cards, blah, blah, blah. So let's go ahead and continue. Let's do, what is it?
Sorry, can you explain that again? The return part?
Okay, yeah. So right here, right?
Yeah.
In render movies, when we call this function, where are we located? On line 55. We're inside of some HTML, some JSX, right? And eventually we want to have H1, and then like, P, and then card or something. Card. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it becomes, right? It looks something like this, right? We want to have a bunch of these, right? We want to have a bunch of these for however many movies that we have, right? So whenever we call render movies, we need to have render movies get that JSX and stick it in here. Okay, we needed to stick it in here. But notice right here on line 34, we did in fact create some cards. This is where we created them. But our return right here, we never returned anything from this function call. So you can imagine if we did this right here, return hello world, right? We're gonna see a hello world somewhere. Let's try a different one. Hello world, this is a demo, red. Okay, so that was what was returned from this function call. But that's not what we wanted. We wanted the cards. So we're gonna turn up here instead. We're gonna delete this because this code sucks. So now we have a bunch of cards. Okay, so what else are we doing? We also need to have what? Our overview. Overview. Okay, that looks okay. And what else do we need to do? I forgot. What else do we need to do? Where's my... Okay, so a user can see the top 20 currently playing movies on a page. Okay? For each movie, the user can see the movie title, year, rating, and poster. Okay? So we don't have we have a movie title, we don't have the year, we don't have the rating, and we don't have the poster. So the year, how can we do that? So we have a release date, and guys, we know that we all know that there's free code out there, right? We all know that there's free code on the internet available for us to use that will help us. So, what's the library that we can use to help us make dates look better, guys? Moment. So we do npm install moment. So now we want this library, and to confirm that we do have it, guys, there's a special file called package.js. In a moment, I expect us to see moment, and there we go. We have this package called moment. Okay. So now we can hop over to our app component, and we can simply import it. Import moment from moment right here, and we can say let's just test. Let's just say moment, and then we give it our release date. What is moment, guys? This is just an object, and we can call a function on it. So we call that. We call moment. We call the function moment with an argument of a release date. Afterwards, we want to parse it. We want to change that a little bit because what's it going to get back to us is going to be an object, and we need to format it in a certain way. So I'm going to jump over to moment.js.home and look at the documentation because there's so many different ways we can format this, and I don't remember what they are. So we're just going to take this one, okay? From now, from now. So we'll call this one, and I expect to see a date inside of here. 24 years ago. Something like that. Okay, so I don't like the styling. Let's go ahead and add some styling. Font size is 50. Font weight is bold. Okay? So I expect the title to be bigger. Okay, that seems good. Let's go ahead and move this out. And let's just leave this right here for now so we don't have to type it again, okay, guys? And then let's just look at our Bootstrap components. I want this to look better. So we're going to look at a list group. Okay? So we see a list group right here. This is an example of it working, right? So let's just go ahead and copy one. Let's go ahead and take the most basic one and then stick it at the bottom of the card. And then we can see our complaint from ESLint. We need to import this. Okay, that looks okay. So now we can copy our moment code and stick it up here. And let's just go ahead and delete these ones. And if we refresh now, we can see that we do have a title right here. Or not a title, but how long ago? Years ago, maybe. Years ago. And right here. That looks like shit. Let's go ahead and add some style. Font weight is bold. Font size is 60. This one's 50 and this one's gonna be 80. Okay, 80, 60. All right, what's the next requirement, guys? Okay, year, rating. Okay, we forgot rating. So now we can just add another list group item, and we can say rating. Rating. And what data do we want to know, guys? Popularity. I'm sorry, I have this memorized, guys, but I expect you guys to constantly be looking, at this right here. I want you guys to did I not console log it? At this right here. Constantly be looking at this, guys, and trying to understand our data, understand how we can manipulate our data, right? So we see a popularity here. Vote average. Is rating is the average, right? Vote average, right?
Yeah.
I think so. That's what makes sense to me. So we're gonna go ahead and add this as our arguments. All right, that looks good. So we just say vote average over here. Oops. Vote average. Why is this? Okay, I don't need to do moment right here. We don't need to use moment. That looks good. And we can see our ratings right here. Okay, guys? Now the last thing we need to do is look at our API. We want to do images, right? Each one of our movie objects does in fact have an image path, a backdrop path. This one is tricky. I had to do some research on this one, guys. This one, they don't give us the full URL. We need to do a little bit of magic. So let's go back to our API and study the documentation. So look for images. We click images, and it gives us an example. It says, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, it's going to give us something that looks kind of like this. Okay? And we need to stick that at the very end of this URL. Okay? So, I'm going to copy this over. I'm going to move over to our render movies. Paste it, and then just comment it out. We'll just comment it out and leave it there for reference. Okay? So now we need to do something called, we need to create a new function. We could not create a new function and write the code inside of here, but that would look sloppy, and I don't want you guys to do that. This right here, card image. You guys see card image right here on line 52? This is where we're going to call this function because we need a string to end up here eventually. Okay, we eventually need a string here. But in order to make this render movies function call cleaner, we're going to go ahead and create a new function. Get movie poster URL. Okay. And this is going to take an argument of a movie. Okay. So now what we need to do is stick that backdrop poster. Was it called backdrop poster? I forgot. Backdrop path. Backdrop path into this string somehow. So we'll copy this. We'll paste. We'll give it some backticks. We'll paste. And what do we do? What do we need to do, guys? We need to destructure the backdrop path. And we need to stick that where? Right here. This is where we need to stick it. Okay, so let's console.log what this is. So refresh, and we made an error. We forgot to call this function. So we want to do that right here because this is where the string is going to go. We need a string in here. So we call this .getMoviePoster, and we call it. Okay, so I expect to see a bunch of strings somewhere, and we made an error somewhere. We forgot to pass the argument of the movie. Oh no, we can just do it right here, man. We already have the backdrop path right here. You guys will see that we're already dealing with our movie object. We can simply pass it directly from here. So that right there, and then we'll just say, okay, so now this is just the path. Path right here. We'll stick this in here. All right, so let's see what works. Okay, so we can see that we successfully console logged a bunch of images here, right? So we open up one of these. Okay, we do in fact have an image. Okay, so now what do we need to do with this data, guys? Where do we need this data to go? Where do we need this data to go? When we get movie poster URL creates the string, what do we want to do with the string? Say again, Kwa? Okay, so if we return from this function call, whatever we return will go inside where the function was called. So this data will now go inside of SRE for each individual movie card that we rendered. So we save it, we hop back over here, and we do see images. Sexy. Okay?
There's a movie called Your Name.
Say again?
Sorry, this is off.
There is a movie called Your Name. I felt super confused for a second too.
I thought you were like hard coding when I saw it earlier on your page. I was like, are you hard coding something prior to getting to the name?
Yeah, it's a real movie. Okay, guys. So I've shown you that we need to use libraries. Come on, let's recap real quickly, guys. Okay? I've shown you guys that we need to use libraries. They make our lives easier. Okay? I've also shown you that leaving our documentation open is really useful. There's nothing wrong with copying code. That doesn't make us bad. Okay? I've also shown you that we need to study our APIs. It took me a while to find this right here. I was very confused for a moment, to be honest with you, about how to do this correctly. So we had to read our documentation to determine how to use this data correctly. And we had to study our API. Okay? Lastly, I'm going to show you one more thing. For those of you who haven't been using good colors, there's a tool on the internet called colors.co. Okay? If we go to this website and we click space, it's just going to randomly generate colors for us. And it helps us out a lot because I don't consider myself a graphic designer. I'm not really good at picking colors. I don't know what colors go good together. So just know that we have a bunch of tools on the internet that are going to help us. And I want you guys to use these tools to make your application decent. Okay? Localhost 3000. Fuck me. Let's say yarn start. I want you guys to try to lay it out decently, okay? Give it some decent colors. Later on, we're going to add, for those of you who get done early, we can have another walkthrough where we have more complicated behavior. Do you have any questions so far? What else do we need to do? I think that's it. Oh no, for each movie, the user can see the movie title, year, rating, and poster done. The user can see this information clearly on various devices. I'm not gonna do this one. All right, I'm gonna let you guys do this one. But we need this to be decent on mobile. Okay, we need to be able to open this up, look at it on our phone, and say, okay, it looks all right on a phone, or does it? I don't think it looks okay on a phone. Yeah, I don't think this looks good on a phone, guys. So I want you guys to do this, okay? I'm serious, man. Like I wish I could show you some of the data points that I've had from my own experience, but most users come to our websites on phones now. Okay? I know you guys have browsed Facebook before and seen the link, and you guys click that link, and that opens up your browser on your phone. And we need that to look okay. We don't need this to look amazing, but we need to at least look useful. This is almost unusable, right? This is unusable. Okay, guys? Okay, so one more. We're gonna do one more, okay? So we're gonna have one more button. We're gonna have a button at the bottom. We'll say button is get more movies, okay? Scroll down, we see a button right here. But when we click it, nothing happens. What do we want this to do? We want it to go out to the internet and get more data. And fortunately, we already know how to do that. And we've already done that. We did that right here in our get movie data function. So now we actually need, instead of writing a completely different function, we could just write our function smarter. So in order to get more data, we need to know about pagination. Okay? Pagination. There are many different ways to do pagination. I'm giving you guys two examples right here. We scroll down here. You can do click a button to get more data, which gets more, or we can have pages. Right? We can click pages as well. There are many different websites. It depends on what your boss wants or what you guys want. The typical pattern, the most useful pattern, is called the infinite scroll. So as I scroll, the application should just go and get more data for us. We don't want the user to have to press a button. That's a waste of their thinking, a waste of their time. It's a bad user experience. But for right now, we're going to be okay with this because before we worry about infinitely scrolling, we need to have an understanding of a page number. Because no API in the world, when you requested that API to give me movies, no API in the world is going to give you all 700,000 movies in their database. They're not going to do that. That is not how it works, because that would make their server amazingly slow to go get 700,000 objects and put it in one response. They're going to give you 20. And then if we make an additional request for a different page number, then the server will get us those specific ones. I've never seen an API that can give more than like 30 objects, or well, in an array like 30 or 40. That's kind of a lot already. I've seen professional companies, guys I think were pro, where you only got 5 at a time, because all these objects are very complicated. Imagine a Facebook post, right? This object has to have, okay, who are the users that liked me? Okay, what's the user who likes me? What's their profile URL? So they can show that little avatar, right? We need to know what that user's profile URL is, so that we can render that. So you imagine a post that has 20 comments, right? Has 20 different people that commented on it. You'd have to have 20 different objects that represented each person. Okay? And this is just one post. So imagine if we got 10 posts, and 10 posts each had 20 comments. So anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just going to show you guys how to do pagination, okay? So in order to make this smarter, the get movie data smarter, we need to have an understanding of pages. So now we can see that our state object is not actually smart enough. We need to have some understanding of that. So we're going to give it a default page number of 1. When the application first loads, we want to get page 1. So in order to do this more efficiently, we can also do this, or not efficiently. In order to make get movies data work correctly, we now need to refactor it. Refactor means take some code that already worked doing one thing and make it do something else, okay? Or make it better, or make it shorter. Refactor means just change our code. So now, let's go ahead and get our page number piece of state off of our piece of data off of our state object. We get page number, and we can simply update this right here, this URL. We want to make this string concatenable, and then we want to pass it an additional argument of page number. Lastly, because we've got a new page.
Hey, look, is that based on reading documentation or something new, or like how do you know to have?
This is a common pattern. This is a common pattern right here. There are actually a couple different ways of doing this, but almost every single API will have a parameter right here. Guys, look at this URL, okay? Okay? Right here we have two parameters. We call these parameters as well. Okay? It's highlighted by the question mark. After the question mark, we can do key equals value. Right here. Key equals value. And we can pass multiple parameters. And page, key, page equals value. The truth is I wasn't even sure that this would work. That's the truth. Before I read this one, I wasn't even sure that this would work, but I just tested it. I was like, all right, fuck it. What's the worst that's gonna happen? My computer's not gonna blow up. So I simply, like, when I read that requirement, I was just like, all right, I'm pretty sure that it's gonna accept this, you know? So just know that this is almost every single one will do this. And also know that there's another very common argument, a parameter called Q. Q stands for query, okay? Query. So we passed in some data like cat. We'd be searching through the data for cat. These are just two very commonly used ones. Okay, so the first time our application loads, when our application loads, we get movie data. When we get our page number off of our state, the default value will be 1. Okay? We make a request that has that page number. Okay? And lastly, now we need to make this a little itty bit smarter. When we do that, we want to update our state as well. We want to say, hey, our state is now our page number plus 1. Okay? So now, get movie data, we can simply stick that here inside our onClick handler. Say this dot that, and we'll save it. We'll hop over here. We'll run over here. We'll get more movies. And we have a problem. Cannot read property state of undefined. The issue here is that this get movie data that we're passing to button It needs to understand what I am. It needs to understand what this component is. It needs to understand what the state is. I told Ray and Phil this earlier. Sometimes you guys may see examples, right, of in your documentation where it says this dot get movie data dot equals get this dot get movie data dot bind dot this. Okay. So we save this. We scroll down. We hit the button. We no longer see that error. What we're saying is like it's like this. Okay. I have a brother. I'll tell you a personal story. Okay. I have a brother. He has a daughter. My brother is okay with me taking care of his daughter. He's okay with me giving her alcohol. Okay, I can give her beer if I want to. He lets me do that, and he laughs. He thinks it's kind of funny. but even though he gives me possession of his daughter, he trusts me. Even though I like messing with her, he still wants his daughter to remember him, and he will always be the father. That's what this does. That's what the bind does. Even though his daughter is now in my custody and I'm the one taking care of her, he wants his daughter to always remember him. That's what binding does. Okay? There are 3 different ways to do this. I'm going to show you 3 different ways right now, guys. D. Can you pay attention to this, please? I want you to pay attention to this because this is going to be a problem. I know you're going to run into this problem. And I'm going to show you 3 different ways to solve this problem right now. Okay? We're talking about right now how to make sure our functions understand who their parent is. Okay? So a moment ago, we didn't have this bind. We refresh. We go down, we fire this function, get more movies, get movies. It didn't understand state of this because when we passed it, it forgot. It said, who the fuck is the parent? I don't remember who I am. So we need to figure out some way to tell this function to always remember the parent. And in this case, the parent is this component right here, the app component. The way that you guys will see a lot of times in really old tutorials is on line 22. Whatever function that we want to remember, we just say this dot that function equals this dot that function dot bind dot this. If I save this and I run it, and we go down and we click get more movies, we can see that it no longer complains. Okay? That is one way. The second way would be to make our function declaration an anonymous function. So I'm going to comment this right here. We're going to do another one. Oops. We're going to do get movie data equals a synchronous function that is a fat arrow function. This will also solve the problem. Okay? So we save it, we run it, we scroll down, we click get more movies. That also solved the problem. So we have one way, dot bind this. The second way is declare it as a fat arrow function. And lastly, let's go ahead and uncomment this. Moved it to the way it was. We click it. We show that it does throw an error. Okay, so the last way to do this is that in the on click, Charles prefers this way. So you guys may see him do it this way. We can do an anonymous function here. Okay? That is the third way to do this. So we save it. We scroll down. We click get more movies. No problem. I personally do not like this way. Okay? I don't like this way. I want you guys to do it upstairs. Do it upstairs outside of the render. Why? Because when we have a real application that starts having a bunch of complicated behavior, these lines will get really long. See this? This line will get really long. This line is already really long. Right here. Right? So I could have changed it right here. I could have said, let's go ahead and get rid of it right here. Let's get rid of it right here. We'll move up and we'll refactor. Same thing. You guys have any questions? So that's 3 different ways to maintain the state of the app to successfully bind the function. So I like it this way. I'm going to refactor and I'm going to say we need to make this a fat arrow function. So we save, we refresh, and now, does this work? Goodfellas is our last movie. We click this, and I think it worked. Actually, it didn't work, guys. What happened right here? Say again? The problem was is that when we fired the function, when we fired the function and we got new data, we threw away all of our old movies and we only had new movies. So we need to do something better. In our get movie data function, when we get the response, when we get our JSON response, we don't want to throw away all our old movies, okay? We want to concatenate. We want to get all our old movies and all the new movies, and we want to stick them together into one new array. So we can do this.state.movies.concat. And the argument will be the array that we want to add to one big array. And I know that's kind of a bit confusing. This one took me a little while to understand. So I'm going to do const students equals, const students equals die phương án bit and. So we have students here, right, guys? That's an array. That's an array. So let's do a new array. Instructors. We'll say equals Loy Charles. Okay. So we have instructors, and we have students. What if we wanted to have a new variable called people? We do const people equals students dot concat instructors. So now let's look at what people is. People. People is simply the two arrays, students and instructors, in one array. So that's what we're going to do here on line 37. We're going to get all our old movies, and we're going to get whatever additional movies that we have and stick them all together. And that's going to be our new array. Okay, so now I expect that, so let's go ahead and do one more thing here to prove this, right? Let's prove this. Let's do console.log, this movie's length, okay? Then we can do this.state.movies.length, okay? So we can see that the first time the page loads, we had 20, okay? We had 20 movies. We scroll down, we click this button. Now our movie's length is 40. Does that make sense, guys? Let's do it one more time to confirm. We click get more movies, and we can see that our movies array is in fact 60. And we can confirm that by looking at our state. We see that the array has 60 items in it. Okay, guys, do you have any questions? You guys have anything you want me to show you? Explain more? Okay, guys, can you guys get on the lab? That's our lab right there for today.